Hello, and welcome to another episode of Be a Leader podcast, where we talk about current events in sports, military, and business through the lens of leadership. So this is part 2 of our episode of Situational Awareness. So if you haven't watched the first one, I encourage you to go back and watch the one from last week. But we are going to do a quick recap as we move forward on this part 2 of that episode. So last week I told you the story of a 24-year-old named Leopold Aschenbrenner, who built a $45 billion hedge fund called Situational Awareness with no professional investing experience, just a lot of conviction, and based off his essay, also called Situational Awareness, about artificial intelligence and how most people just didn't realize how big it was going to become in the future. And I told you how the same week when his wedding guests were coming in for his own wedding, that the fund lost 67% of his value in that 1 month alone. And then he had to be bailed out by Citadel in a deal signed 20 minutes before the market opened. All right. Last week, we talked about what was going on inside of Leopold. Issues about success, identity, the gap between knowing a principle and actually being able to do it. We talked about all that. But as I kept thinking about this story, I started to think about many of the military principles that I learned early as a young officer in the United States Marine Corps. Not investing principles, but leadership principles, right? Things that we talk about in this podcast. Principles that are much older, thousands of years older than any of these hedge funds out there. So today, we're going to go through 5 different leadership principles, and this time through a military lens. So let's get after it. The first principle I want to talk about is maintaining a reserve. Okay, in basic military doctrine, you're never going to commit everything, all right, to the enemy, no matter what. You're not. It doesn't matter how confident you are. You always have, that's part of the structure that you do in the military. Best principles. You're always going to have a reserve. You're always going to have a quick reactionary force, QRF. You're going to have different elements. You're not going to put in everything, okay, no matter what. Situational awareness put in a majority, a massive amount of their capacity in these stocks based off their thesis in artificial intelligence, okay? And they leverage it even more by levering it. We were talking about borrowing money. For every dollar capital that they had raised, they were putting $3 to $4 of borrowed money to go even deeper. They were putting everything into it. And then not only on top of that, by June, 56% of their entire portfolio, more than half, was just on 2 companies, 2 bets. That's how much they went all in. They had no reserve. They had no margin. And every dollar that they had was going on the same bet. And then once the battlefield started to change in July, there was nothing there to absorb it. Okay, the whole position was exposed all at once. And the key here is to never build a life or an organization that requires everything to go right. It sounds obvious, but you got to have those margins so you can maneuver. And the leverage that he had was destroying his ability to do things. Okay? So always maintain a reserve. And that leads us into point number 2. Preserve the freedom of action. It's very connected here. It's the whole story of situational awareness is compressed in this contrast between them and Citadel. Situational awareness had to act. Citadel got to choose to act. They could do what they wanted. Situational awareness needed liquidity because they didn't have the money. Citadel had plenty of liquidity. They could do what they wanted. Situational awareness needed a buyer quickly. Citadel had options. They could buy. They don't have to buy. Situational awareness had to negotiate for survival. Citadel was very healthy, and they could negotiate for price. Situational awareness had to close a deal before the market opened. Citadel could have walked away at any point. Didn't matter for them. And this is the result. Citadel was able to buy a large quantity from situational awareness, bailing them out, but at a discount of over 10%. They got to buy it really cheaply. And then not only did they buy it, but when prices started to go back up, as we mentioned last time, they made billions of dollars off of this one agreement with situational awareness alone. Citadel came out on top big. And that's the military preparation here. Right? A principle. Preparation doesn't guarantee you know what's going to happen. Okay. Leopold thought he was very prepared because he believed he knew what was going to happen better than anyone else. And that was what he was putting all his bets on. But preparation preserves your ability to choose, okay, once things actually happen. And he was not prepared. In the Marine Corps, we spend so much time preparation, and we prepare and prepare and prepare, but we prepare so that our minds are ready. Our minds are ready what can happen. That's why we prepare. That's mature confidence under pressure, is what Citadel did. Not knowing, I know what's going to happen. Okay, it's whatever happens, I still get to choose my response. And that's why for me, confidence is really the freedom to execute. Because in the pressure moments, you don't want to think about confidence. You want to be able to execute, the freedom to play. And that's what Citadel did, and that's what situational awareness could not do. And that leads into point number 3. Don't confuse activity with diversification. Right? Situational awareness, they were long on AI winners and they were short on AI losers. So semiconductors, infrastructures, those were the things they thought was going to go up, and software, they thought it was going to go down. It looks like two different strategies, but really it's the same coin, two sides of the same coin. Okay? It's one strategy. Both sides depend on the same underlying assumption about AI. It's almost like my 1-3-1 defense in basketball. As they move, they're connected to a string. My players are to make sure that defense works well. It's the same thing here. Both sides were moving at once. And so the parallel here is, if every course of action that you plan depends on the enemy making one choice, you are not really making multiple courses of action. Okay, you're not really prepared. In the Marine Corps, we have something called the MCOL and MDCOL, the enemy's most likely course of action and the enemy's most dangerous course of action. And you plan for both of those, knowing that they're actually going to behave somewhere in between, but it really gets you prepared to think about what the enemy does, because the enemy always has a vote. We talk about that all the time. And when you don't do that, then you're putting yourself in a dangerous position. Hey, let's talk about it like in a business scenario. Okay, you could have your company could have 5 products, but it all depends on one customer. What happens when that customer preferences change? You're in trouble. What happens if a person has 3 income streams? Great, but they're all tied to the same industry. What happens if there's major changes within that industry? Right, you're in trouble. What about a leader who takes advice from 5 different people, but they all think the same and they think just like the leader? Recipe for disaster, again, because you're going to have all these blind spots and you're not going to be prepared because you all think the same thing, right? That's what groupthink is called. So ask yourself, what is the single assumption that connects everything that I'm doing? And what happens if that one assumption breaks? What happens to everything? That's the question on this point. Let's move on to point number 4, and that's logistics wins wars. So I'm not a logistician. I was not a logo in the Marine Corps, but I spent time with artillery. I spent time with tanks. I spent time with different ground maneuver forces. I was Anglicos. I was dropping bombs from the sky. Like, logistics was part of it, right? So I appreciate it. But most people don't want to talk about logistics. They want to talk about strategy, okay? But logistics is where things actually happen. That's what helps the outcome. Situational Awareness ran a $45 billion hedge fund with an extremely small team for the majority of their existence. They had a couple of analysts, they had an economics, they had a director of research, and they had a risk manager. But it wasn't until much later, when they got bigger, that they started bringing in more experienced finance people, compliance, risk people also to help. But it was also when it's ballooned in size so much. I think about militaries, right? An army can advance faster than its own supply lines. It can, but that creates major vulnerability. The saying goes, you can only go so long with beans, bullets, and band-aids before they run out. And that's where logistics is. But let's think about bigger than logistics, because it's part of the structure that you built, right? A good military force needs good logistics. That's why in the Marine Corps we emphasize it so much, along with the ground combat element, the air element, the command element. You have to have the logistical element. It's part of it. It is so important, and that's why the Marine Corps is so dangerous. But let's look at it from a business standpoint, okay? Revenue outrunning your systems. Having a bunch of revenue and it keeps growing is fantastic. But if you don't have that structure in place to protect what could happen if you grow too quickly, then you're going to be in trouble. What about headcount? Outrunning your culture. It's so easy to make the mistake to hire quickly and fire slowly when in fact you should be hiring slowly and firing quickly. Why? Because you want to protect your culture. It is so important because it's how you behave, it's how you act, right? Identity, behavior, results. Strong identity, behaviors that match, results come out at the end. But if you're so focused on growing quickly with headcount, you can lose your culture. And that's a huge vulnerability. So get a third example. Responsibility outrunning your leadership capacity. Maybe you started as a leader, but things get more complex over time. And if you are not growing yourself as a leader, doing professional courses, having a mentor, having a coach, you can start making decisions that you are not ready to handle that are going to create ripple effects for your entire organization. And the unfortunate thing out of these three scenarios, I see this one the most often. Leaders not keeping up with the growing responsibilities of their leadership position. I see this one the most, and it hurts everyone in the organization. It's a huge danger. So again, from the outside, growth can look like a strength. Looks great, everyone wants to grow. But underneath it, it can mean just taking a load on a structure that hasn't caught up yet. In other words, right, growth doesn't automatically make an organization stronger. Sometimes it's just increasing the weight on a foundation that's not ready to carry it yet. Make sure that your structure is also being built. Talk about this with startup founders all the time. The growth of your company depends on the growth of you as an individual founder. The same thing with leaders. The growth of your organization depends on your growth as a leader. It's so easy to overlook it, but it's so important. Don't be like Leopold, who thinks he knows everything and then gets in a massive pickle. Okay. Prepare, keep growing. Make sure that your infrastructure is growing along with you and everyone else. And that leads into point number 5. And this is, I'd say, a good thing that we're seeing now from Leopold. In the Marine Corps, so the lesson is the after-action review is a requirement. It's part of discipline. And in the Marine Corps, we have, after every major exercise or operation, an after-action review. We talk about what happened, the conditions, what went well, what could be improved, how we're going to learn about it in the future, because we always want to move forward. We want to lean forward, learn in the future. It's not optional. It's built in the process every single time. That's how we grow. Leopold wrote to his investors, verbatim, "We let you down this month." He also said, "I take full responsibility for these events." And in the context of committing to change, he said, to ensure a high level of resilience going forward. That's ownership, right? Saying the right things, pushing forward, and making sure that he's not blaming the market. Make sure he's not blaming the short sellers for what they did to him. Make sure he's not hiding behind the thesis that, hey, we're still right and nothing needs to change. He didn't say those things. He's 24 years old. His brain still hasn't fully developed. Not till 28, 29. Body's still maturing. It's unbelievable what he's done so far. He still has a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund that he's running. And with extreme privileged holdings, including Anthropic. The mistakes do not have to be defining his entire career, okay? What he does with the lessons, that's what matters. And maybe it's the same thing with you. Maybe you had a major mistake in your life, in career, with your family. It does not have to be what defines you. The mistake doesn't have to be what defines you, or the failure, the story in your mind doesn't have to be define you. It's all about what you do with the lesson moving forward. Let that define you, because you get to choose what defines you. It's part of your identity. It's part of how you show up, depending on how you identify yourself. Look, if he comes out with this, out of this whole episode with the same powerful conviction he had when he built it, but now with the lessons about better infrastructure, more margin, more room for dissent in his team, then he might actually be more dangerous in the good sense because he can do more things. Conviction plus scar tissue is a powerful combination. So we're all on our growth journeys. So we all need to have grace for ourselves and others as we make mistakes and as we move forward. And the after action review is where that conversation gets started. That's why it's so important. And my Confident Leader Bootcamp is built around, that's part of it, learning how to move forward. Most coaches just teach mindset, and mindset's very important, but it's just part of it, because when the pressure comes, your identity gets revealed and you fall to your lowest level of training. And so we got to build that identity and pressure test it and pressure test it and pressure test it in a safe environment where you can grow. And that's what we do in Confident Leader Bootcamp. It's not enough just to feel motivated after a setback. You need to have an actual process so that you can grow, so you can move forward and build a more powerful identity as you grow. My last cohort for 2026 is starting here in a few weeks in mid-September. And if you've had your own version of a rough July, a decision that didn't go the way you wanted, a blind spot that cost you a lot, maybe you had an epic, torturous marriage in July like he had, and you actually want to build the discipline to build yourself moving forward, besides just feeling bad about it, I'd love to have you in the room. So you can take a look at the show notes or go to my website, danielpinedo.com, to look at more details on that. And with that, let's bring this home and talk about the 5 main lessons. So you can see I got a new stand here for those that are watching the video from my college basketball whiteboard. And let's look at these key leadership lessons. So the first one, maintain a reserve. Never build a life or an organization that requires everything to go right. It sounds obvious, but it happens. It happened here. Point number 2, preserve freedom of action. Preparation doesn't tell you what's coming. It prepares you and protects you for the ability to choose as things happen. So preserve that freedom, have some preparation, don't put it all in one bag. Point number 3, don't confuse activity with diversification. You see, it's kind of, we all did this right in our handwritten notes. We just barely fit it here, but yeah, it's barely fit there. Diversification, okay? Multiple bets on the same assumption is really just one bet. And that was a big problem with situational awareness. Let's make sure we're not doing the same thing. Point number 4, logistics wins wars. Yeah, I'm a fires guy. I like to blow stuff up, but I have to acknowledge that the structure is so important, and that includes logistics. Growth without infrastructure to support it does not make you stronger. It makes you more fragile. Okay? Be better than that. Be a leader. Prepare, grow. Point number 5, the after action is a requirement. It's part of discipline. Leopold said the same things after the fall. He said, we let you down. He said, I take full responsibility. That is ownership. But the words only matter if you do something, if you actually have a process. It's not just good apology isn't good enough. It starts with the after action review, but it continues with good governance. And that's going to be the question moving forward for Leopold and situational awareness. Now that they've built better situational awareness, let's see what they do about it, right? So these lessons, along with last week's lessons about how success can be more dangerous than failure, about every strength has a shadow, has a dark side, and about knowing the principle is not the same thing as living it. All this combined gives us a better full picture, better situational awareness of the hedge fund called situational awareness. How a brilliant young man who was right about the future, but nearly lost everything because, why? Because being right is not the same as leading well. That's why I do this Confident Leader or Be a Leader podcast. That we need reminders. That's not about being right. It's knowing how to live well. It's a lifestyle. It's how we show up and make decisions, how we lead ourselves, lead others, and leading leaders. And this is the question I have for you to sit this week. Where in your life, in your team, in your business, have you built something that only works if everything goes right? What are your reserves? Do you have freedom of action? Who's watching your logistics as you're focused on strategy? These are questions we need to ask because that's part of being a leader. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Be a Leader podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this whole situational awareness about Leopold. If you like this business topic, what are your big lessons learned? What do you think moving forward? Have you built your own situational awareness on where you're at in your leadership growth and your journey? And with that, thank you very much again for watching this episode, Be a Leader podcast. And remember, whether you're leading yourself, leading others, or leading leaders, be a leader. My name is Daniel Pinedo. Thank you. Until next time.